Hi, and welcome to this live stream on the One Yoga YouTube channel. Finally, I'm going live. It's been a little bit challenging to set up, but here we are. So, thank you so much for joining in today and for being present. Before we dive into our topic for today, the philosophy of Yin Yoga, I quickly want to introduce myself. My name is Kat, and I'm a yoga teacher here at One Yoga in Thailand. And today I want to talk about the philosophy of Yin Yoga. So let's dive in, grab yourself a cup of tea, and get comfortable. In case you're new to Yin Yoga, let me give a brief introduction. In Yin Yoga, the postures are passive. They are performed usually seated or lying down. So we are staying close to the ground. Another important element is that our muscles, while we're in a yin yoga pose, are completely relaxed. So we're not tensing up, we're not engaging the muscles, but we're letting go and surrendering into the shape. Another important point is that in yin yoga, we hold the postures much longer than we do in other styles, typically around 3 minutes or more, even up to 10 minutes. That way, yin yoga targets not the muscles, like most other styles of yoga and also exercise, but it targets the connective tissue of the body, the fascia, the ligaments, and the joints. And yin yoga is a very beautiful complement to other more dynamic forms of yoga and exercise. Another thing that sets yin yoga apart from the other yoga styles is that its philosophy is based not so much in Hinduism, like other yogic philosophy, but it is based in Chinese philosophy, the philosophy called Taoism, as well as Chinese medicine. And that's what I want to go into today. Based on the name Yin Yoga, let's go straight into the first aspect of the philosophy, which is the yin and the yang. I'm sure all of you are familiar and have seen that symbol. It's quite popular. But we don't necessarily understand the full meaning of the yin and yang symbol. Yin is described as the feminine principle. It is passive, slow, it is cooling, downward moving, and inward moving. Yang, on the other side, is the masculine principle. It is active, dynamic, expansive, outward and upward moving, as well as heating. You can compare them to the moon and the sun and the qualities that they embody. And these qualities or energies of yin and yang were first observed by the ancient Chinese in the nature that was surrounding them. In fact, the Chinese characters for yin and yang, respectively, simply mean the shady and sunny side of the hill, because they discovered or observed that one side of a hill or mountain was receiving much more sunlight than the other. And therefore, that one side was much more vibrant in life. It was hotter, there was more activity, more growth. Whereas on the shady side, everything was a bit more cooler, a bit more inward, a bit slower in terms of the growth and expansion. You can also observe yin and yang in the different seasons, winter, summer, in the different climates around the world, from the cold Antarctic to the hot Sahara Desert. They embody different levels of yin and yang. We can also observe yin and yang in ourselves, in our human mind-body system. We can observe it physically, mentally, and also emotionally. Maybe the emotional aspect is easiest to understand right off of the bat. Sometimes we feel very joyful, energized, expansive, and then other days we're feeling maybe more inward, more pensive, we're moving slower. And this is the different qualities of yin and yang in our human system. It's important to note that nothing is ever 100% yin or 100% yang. And so while we're calling them the feminine and masculine principle, obviously both men and women, in fact, everybody, regardless of gender, has both qualities at different levels. And those qualities are also going to fluctuate based on how we're feeling, how we're taking care of ourselves, and so on and so forth. And this thing that nothing is ever fully yin or yang, we can even see in the symbol itself. Because if you imagine the circle with the two teardrop-shaped halves, one black, one white, each of those contains a little circle, a little drop of the other, which means that yin contains yang and yang contains yin. Imagine that at night, which is a very yin time, it's dark, we can still see the light of the stars, which is that tiny little element of yang inside the yin of night. We can also say, I have my notes here just for reference and to make sure I don't forget anything. We can also say that yin and yang control each other. So that if we've been living in one energy for too much or too long, the universe is going to act on us to help us come back to a balance. Because Chinese medicine teaches that harmony and health lie in balance. So we don't always want to be in the yang energy, even though that's kind of what is being advocated in our modern lifestyle. We always want to be active. We always want to be full of energy. We're always keeping ourselves busy. So we're being very, very young most of the time. But actually, in order for us to feel full, wholesome health and vitality, we need the yin as well. So if we've been living in a very busy way, morning till night, running about, doing errands, tasks, work, at some point, the universe is going to pull us back into a more yin state. For example, by making us sick. We might come down with a cold or a flu, which basically forces us to then take some rest and go into this yin quality. And so that's how we are constantly moving in and out of balance between the yin and the yang. And that is okay. There are times where we need more of this dynamic, fiery, heated energy. But then we should remember that we also need to allow ourselves to go inwards, to slow down, and to be more yin. Last but not least, yin and yang are constantly transforming into one another. So yin becomes yang, yang becomes yin. We can see that in the change from day to nighttime. It changes from being hotter outside, bright, everybody's more active, even nature is more active, to nighttime where everything is slowing down, calming down. We can also see that constant cycle of transformation in the seasons. Summer is very young, it is hotter, there's more growth, more activity. And then winter is the most yin. It's cold, inward, And even us, most of the time, we tend to stay home more, be more within ourselves instead of like outward doing activities. And so this transformation from summer through autumn to winter and then spring again, moving into summer, is maybe one of the most pronounced ways that we can explore and experience the transformative essence of the yin and the yang. And that actually brings us to the main topic for today, which is the 5 elements according to Chinese medicine and philosophy. The Chinese elements are a little bit different than the ones you might know, which is fire, water, earth, air, and perhaps ether or space. The Chinese elements are also fire, earth, and water, so the ones we're familiar with, but then they have the element of wood and metal. And in fact, they're usually called the 5 elements, but it might be even more accurate to call them the 5 phases, which emphasizes the fact that they are of a cyclical nature. So we're constantly moving from one phase into the next, and so on, so forth. You can consider these 5 phases or elements as the fundamental building blocks of nature, the material world, and also ourselves. They govern nature, they govern the different seasons, climates, and in humans, they govern our physical, mental, and our emotional well being. And so today, I want to go and give an overview of every one of these phases and talk a little bit about how we can incorporate them into our yin yoga practice. Because if the goal is to establish a balance and harmony between yin and yang and to live in harmony with the outer as well as the inner phases or seasons, then yin yoga is a fantastic tool to help us achieve that. So the first element or phase I want to talk about is the water element. And this is actually the most yin-like, as I mentioned before. Water, the qualities are surrendering, letting go, contracting, and moving inward. It is related to the season of winter. Water has all these qualities of stillness that encourage us to slow down and take time for ourselves. Just like nature slows down in winter, everything is contracted. There are no more leaves on the trees. But that doesn't mean that nature is fully dead or that winter is a phase that we want to move through as fast as we can, or ideally even skip, which is how many of us might feel about the actual time of winter, and also when we ourselves are feeling a bit more contracted. But actually, this phase is as important and as beautiful as all the others if we know how to be with it in harmony. Because without winter, which is a time where in nature the seeds are in the ground germinating, there would be no spring, there would be no growth and expansion as the sun starts coming out again. We need this time of stillness in order for there to be an expansion at all. And that's what makes winter so beautiful. If we learn how to be with that and how to take that time for introspection, for focusing on what we actually want, who we are, and focusing on nurturing our inner world instead of always being so outwardly focused. The water element, and thus the season of winter, is also related to the kidney and urinary bladder organs in the body. So in Chinese medicine, every one of these elements is associated with a specific set of organs and meridians. Quick side note on meridians. Meridians are energy pathways in the body. In other yoga styles, they would be referred to as nadis. And these energy channels carry our life force energy, prana in yogic philosophy, and qi in the Chinese philosophy. And this life force energy is everywhere around us, in every living and non living thing, and of course, also in ourselves. And the elements can also be considered as different expressions of this qi, this life force energy. And this energy runs through meridians, which can be considered as little rivers all the way through the body. And they are connected to our connective tissue. Nowadays, many people suspect that this is where these meridians run. And therefore, by targeting the connective tissue in specific areas of the body, we're targeting specific meridians that are related to specific organs, which in turn belong to different elements. And this is how Yin Yoga can help us balance between the different elements and energies. So coming back to the water element or phase, it's connected to the kidney and the urinary bladder organs and meridians. And these meridians run along our back body mostly, so the superficial back line, over the head and then along the spine, down the back, and also in the inner thighs, so the adductors, basically, if you're thinking in muscle groups, as well as through our groin. And so if we want to target these specific energy pathways, you can think especially about forward folds, because here we're going to be applying tension to our back lines. And you can also think about especially wide-legged forward folds, because this is where we're also going into the inner thighs as well. So quick demonstration, a yin yoga pose, bringing the legs wide, and then going into a forward fold. And remember that in yin yoga, we don't need to tense our muscles. You can let everything relax. Use as many props as you can, pillows, blocks, bolsters, to make your body comfortable. Because this is also important if you want to be practicing yin yoga. In yin yoga, we don't want to push the body. Because if you push yourself beyond the limitations and then you hold there for multiple minutes, you're going to experience a lot of pain. And in the long term, that is definitely not beneficial. That's why in yin yoga, we say to find your edge and then to stay there, to feel sensation. A little bit of discomfort is okay, but not to feel pain. If you're feeling pain anywhere in the body, it's a sign to back off and ease out of that shape. You can imagine it, that is what one of the teachers I follow likes to say. You can imagine it as having a wall here. You want to make gentle contact with that wall of sensation. You don't want to slam your fist or your head through it. And so that's what finding your edge and staying with your edge means. So summing up the water element, it's most yin-like. It's very internal, contracted. It's a time of stillness, surrender. It's connected to the kidney and the urinary bladder meridians, which are on the superficial back line, inner thighs, and groin. And so these are exactly the areas we would want to target to work with the phase or element of water. So one example would be forward folds. The next element we're going into is the wood element. Wood is connected to the time of spring. So we're moving out of the very, very yin-like season of winter into a slightly more yang time of spring, where everything starts to grow and to expand. So wood is very much associated with growth, our creative potential, renewal, rebirth. And it is connected to the meridians of the liver and the gallbladder. Wood has very beautiful qualities that help us in times where we have a project to launch, where we want to start putting ourselves more out into the world, where we want to plan and organize things, because it brings that more expansive quality with it. And to work with the wood element in your yin yoga practice, you want to be targeting your outer hips and glutes, as well as, again, your inner thighs and groin, plus the lateral lines of your body, so the side bodies. So there are actually quite a few postures, yin postures, that are very much associated with the wood element. One example would be any kind of side bends. So there is a pose in yin yoga called the banana pose, which is where you're lying down on the ground and you're creating that half moon or banana shape with your body. Um, Another pose that can help to target the outer hips and glutes would be the shoelace pose, where you stack your knees on top of each other and sit down between your feet. And then you have options. Again, you could go into a forward fold. You can keep sitting up tall, even on a cushion like I am doing right now. You can add a gentle twist, maybe even a side bend to target even more the outer hips and the lateral lines. There are so many options just in this one pose to change the way it feels in your body. If you are curious about more postures related to all of the different yin elements, then make sure to check out the One Yoga Online Studio. I recorded a whole series on this topic of the 5 elements of yin yoga. So there are 5 1-hour yin classes in there on the different elements, where every pose is targeting the specific element that we're focusing on in the class. And I talk more about the philosophy and the different qualities of the elements. This is really just a very, very brief, shallow introduction to the topic. Um, the elements have so much more to offer. For example, there are different emotions associated with every element in its balanced and imbalanced state. I talk about other ways that you can find that balance and work with every specific element. So if that's something that you're interested in after this video, please go check it out, and you can join with a 30-day free trial if you go to the link in our YouTube channel here. But I don't want to get too sidetracked, so let's move on with the next element, which is fire. Fire is associated, as you can imagine, with a lot of passion, energy, vitality, creativity, and again, that expansion. And it's associated, again, this is quite obvious, with the season of summer. Summer is the hottest time of the year. There is the most expansion in nature. Everything is blooming, is growing, fruits are starting to ripen. And so this is the most young-like time of the year. We've moved from winter, the most yin, to starting into more yang through spring, and then now we're at the peak. This is the peak of outwardly expression and energy. And the fire element is actually the only one that is related to not 2 organs, but 4, which is the heart, the small intestine, the pericardium, which is kind of a protective layer around the heart, and the Jiao, The Sun Jiao is, again, a little bit different because it's not actually a physical organ that you can find in the human body. This is something the Chinese discovered as more of like a, I guess you can call it an energetic organ. It's the only one that is not to be physically located if you were to look inside a human body. And the meridians of these four organs run in the upper body, specifically the front and the back of your arms. And so yin poses for the fire element are going to be targeting this specific area, the arms, shoulders, as well as your chest. And so you can think of postures like Sphinx pose or seal. Seal is similar to cobra from other yoga styles, but it's the yin version of it. There are many poses in yin yoga that look very, very similar to the poses we do in other yoga styles, but they have different names because we approach them differently with the relaxed muscles, the longer holds, and that's why they have different names. And they'll also be looking a little bit different. But yeah, all these poses that will open your chest and work with your arms and shoulders as well are great for stimulating and balancing the fire element. Next, we are moving into the earth element. Earth, again, and that is the beauty that at least I find in the Chinese philosophy. I find it very, it just makes sense. I feel like it's this common sense approach that once we've heard about it, we can start observing it everywhere around and within us. And I think that is so beautiful because it makes it easier to integrate into our lives. It is very down to earth. So, coming back to that element, earth has these qualities of nourishment. It is very solid, it's grounding, and it's connected to the season of late summer. Or it can also be viewed as connected to the transition time between every season. But let's stick with late summer for the sake of more visualizing this element. So as you can imagine, late summer was a time where we're slowly moving from that expansion into a state of slightly more calming and settling down. And so earth element actually has a very equal balance of yin and yang qualities. It's also the time of harvest, late summer. And so earth, that's why it is so nourishing. It gives life. It provides us with what we need to take ourselves and to nurture ourselves. And earth is related to the organs of the spleen and the stomach, and thus those meridians, spleen and stomach meridians. And they run on the superficial front line of the body mainly. So the entire front of the body, specifically what we can target through yin yoga would be our quadriceps, so the front of our thigh. One pose, for example, would be saddle pose. From other styles, you might know it more as hero or reclining hero. I can give just a very quick demonstration. But for saddle pose, you would either be sitting on your heels and then start leaning back. You can come all the way to lying down even, maybe place a bolster underneath, and you'll feel the sensation on your quads. Another option if sitting on your heels is not comfortable would be to sit in between your heels like that. Another way to work with the front line of the body, more the hip flexors, would be dragon pose, which is known as lizard in the other yoga styles. But again, if you want to do the actual practice, I highly recommend to check out my 5 Elements of Yin Yoga series, because that's going to be much more in depth. Plus, you'll have multiple postures for every element. Coming into the last final element now, which is metal. Metal and the season of autumn. Everything is starting to contract more and more, preparing for that final stillness of winter. And so autumn is returning very much to this yin-like state. It is also associated with the qualities of letting go, as well as transformation. The metal element, I like to imagine it as really something made of metal, a blade that helps us cut through and distinguish the things that are no longer needed, no longer serving us, helping us to let go of that in order to make space for what we really do need and what nourishes us. And so, metal, the qualities of letting go, transforming, change, as well as contracting, starting to move inward. The metal element is connected to the lungs and the large intestine, and the meridians for these organs run again in the upper body. So we want to target the chest, the shoulders, as well as the rib cage, because metal is connected to the lungs and therefore our breath. And we want to create space for our breath to move through. So these are the 5 phases or elements in Yin Yoga. We have the water, the wood, the fire, earth, and metal. And I already touched on this a few times, but you might still be wondering, why are these elements important for me? Why do I need to know about them? And why should I practice with them? And the answer is that knowing and understanding these elements can really help you know and understand yourself. Because, like I said earlier, in our modern day and age, we tend to expect ourselves and others to always be active, joyful, happy. We always expect ourselves to be very young, very productive, busy. And so when we then fall into a stage where we're not that, but we are feeling maybe a bit more sad, pensive, we have a lot going on inside, we're very internalized. We often end up criticizing ourselves, giving ourselves a really hard time for it. And that happens, I think, a lot to every one of us. Specifically for women, I can say this can also be very much connected to your moon cycle and the changing levels of hormones you're experiencing. But again, this is not something that most people accept as part of themselves. And this is how working with yin and yang and the 5 elements can really help us become more accepting of all the different expressions that we have and we bring to the table. You wouldn't expect nature to be providing fruits or vegetables in a time of winter. You won't get mad at Mother Earth that nothing is growing and it's cold outside, because you know that it's normal. You know that winter is a phase just like the others, and you also know that it is going to pass. It's not going to be cold forever, just like it's not going to be summer forever. And so we start to be able to appreciate and celebrate times of high energy and summer, for example. But we also learn to accept and maybe even honor and find gratitude for the times of yin, of contraction and stillness, because we start noticing that both sides of the scale are equally as important. And so this is why I really love the practice of yin yoga. If you have a busy lifestyle or if you are a very active person, that is great. But yin yoga can help you find more balance. By working with the connective tissues, of course, you're going to increase your range of mobility and flexibility as well. So if that's something you want to work toward, then Yin Yoga is a great complementary practice. It also helps to release pent up or stagnant emotions because really the body is a storehouse for our emotions, especially the ones that we never really dealt with and that we just kind of suppressed and shut down. Those emotions can lodge basically inside your tissues. And that's why it's not uncommon for people to experience that release in yin yoga. And that release might feel really joyful. Sometimes you might feel sad, even cry. But that is beautiful because you're actually taking the time to let these emotions arise to the surface so that then they can be let go instead of just being stored in your system day after day, month after month, and year after year, just building up. Another beautiful element of yin yoga is that because it's so slow, it really gives you time to go inward, to observe all the different sensations in your body and also your mind, to practice presence and awareness, which are these very meditative qualities that yoga is really all about. If you might know, I mention this all the time, yoga was never meant to be an exercise program. It was meditation and the path towards self awareness or enlightenment. And I actually really like that yin yoga brings that meditative quality into our physical practice. So if you're one who struggles with the pure meditation of sitting and going inward, which I know many people do, yin yoga is actually a great first step toward that because you are still doing something for your body. You are still from time to time moving and shifting shapes, but in between, you have these 3 to 5 to maybe even sometimes 10 minutes where you can practice that self awareness. And so that is another yin like quality that many of us have almost lost in this day and age. We're so always engaged in the external world instead of our internal world. So that is just my favorite reasons for practicing yin yoga and for working with the 5 elements. They can help you when you feel that you are out of balance. Maybe you've been too much in the fire element, and then you can apply your yin yoga practice specifically on the more opposing element, water, which is going to control and help bring down that inner fire. And vice versa. If you're feeling that you are too much in this yin state of water and you're too internalized, you can't get yourself out of it, you can't re energize yourself, then working with the fire element. And of course, that can look like doing a dynamic vinyasa flow, which is very fiery. But maybe that is too much for you in that moment. And so you just do a yin practice, which has still those internalized qualities, but you're working specifically with the fire element. And I'm very sure that you will feel a little more energized after doing that specific practice. So I hope that this gave you a little bit of an insight into the philosophy of Yin Yoga. And I hope that it inspired you to get on your mat and try something different today. If you want, I'll say it one last time. Please do check out my series. It's called The 5 Elements of Yin Yoga, and you will find it in the One Yoga online studio. If you go to our channel here, then you can find a link and sign up for the 30-day free trial, in which time you can explore as many classes as you want. We don't only have yin yoga, we have a variety of styles from vinyasa to ashtanga, kundalini, as well as talks on yoga philosophy, breath work, and more. So I'd be really happy and excited to see you there. And I hope you have a wonderful rest to your day. And remember to stay balanced. Thank you so much for tuning in.